Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another Homeschool Resource Finder Parent Workshop. We're talking all things algebra today. Ah! No, I'm really glad we're tackling this topic because I know even for me it causes so much anxiety amongst parents. And I have Pat from Maths Online joining us today to help us make sense of algebra. So thank you so much for joining us, Pat. Really appreciate you taking this time out of your day for us. And I'm going to hand the floor straight over to you.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks, Kylie, and we see some people joining us. Great. I guess the algebra, the whole idea of algebra and math in general, I know it causes a bit of anxiety amongst homeschooling mums and dads, but I think it's an interesting one in terms of when the kids are in primary, the math side of things is generally a little less daunting, I guess. But once we hit high school and sort of beyond, it can be a bit more challenging and cause a bit of anxiety. So I guess just to let you know, Kylie, and let the audience know a little bit about me, so you sort of thinking, why should I be listening to this guy? I taught in high schools for about a dozen years or so, and then was creating a program to help which has eventually helped a lot of hundreds of thousands of kids and teachers and homeschooling families as well. So our program is used in more than 1,000 schools in Australia and used close to 20,000 homeschooling families in the US and as other parts of the world. So I guess I've been doing this for a little while, so I sort of know a little bit about what works and what doesn't work. So I thought I would share with algebra just an introduction and how we can actually make it a little bit more fun, but a little less daunting as well. And if I can have a go at sharing my screen, I'm going to run through, I'll sort of set it up a little bit. I'm going to run through a magic trick, a magic number trick, but it's got the basis of algebra, but I'm going to show you or introduce it with just a couple of things that aren't algebraic. So we're just going to be looking at some avocados and nectarines to start with. And we're just going to see how something evolves and turns into a magic trick, which then turns into a bit of algebra. And it's something that your kids can learn pretty quickly. And they'll think they're pretty clever, which they are, because if they can do a magic trick with numbers, it's good for confidence. So I think if I get started, if I share my screen and I'll
good.
Keep going. All righty. So
please, I'll just open the chat up for you all. If you have any questions as we go along the way, use the chat for sure whilst Pat's getting that screen up.
I did mention we're going to look at avocados and nectarines, and I've chosen those particular fruits for a particular reason. And we're just going to start off with a couple of basic rules. Okay. So when we have an avocado, we're always going to start off with an avocado. We're always going to start off with an avocado. And when it comes to addition and subtraction, we can add an avocado or subtract one avocado at a time. Okay, so that's rule number one. And then when we've got some nectarines, with the nectarines, we can add as many nectarines as we like, or we can subtract as many nectarines as we like, as long as we don't get into the negative territory with nectarines, right? And I don't know if you know about negative nectarines, but you could explain to your kids a negative nectarine is someone who is a nectarine that's always complaining. They're always saying it wasn't my fault. Okay, so we're going to avoid the negative nectarines. So, all right, so we've only got two rules so far. We're going to start off with an avocado, and we can add one or subtract one avocado at a time. And then we're going to introduce some nectarines, and we can add or subtract as many nectarines as we like. Okay, so that's addition and subtraction covered. And then when we come to multiplication, when we multiply, let's say we had, let's say at this stage we had 2 avocados, and let's say we had 3 nectarines. And we said, let's multiply by 5. So we're going to multiply. Well, the rule in this game which then blends into algebra. We have to multiply everything by 5. We just can't multiply the avocados by 5 or the nectarines. We've got to multiply each. So 2 avocados times 5, that'll be 10 avocados. And then 3 nectarines multiplied by 5 will be 15 nectarines. Okay, so at that stage, that's another rule we've introduced. And hopefully those rules aren't that challenging yet. So when we multiply, we just got to make sure we multiply everything at the same time. And then the same for division. So if we were dividing, we would again need to divide everything at the same time. And when we divide, I'll give you an idea. If I see 10 avocados here and then 15 nectarines, and someone might say, well, let's divide by 2. Okay, now we can divide each of those by 2, but just for the purposes of our exercise, we don't want to have any fractions, right? So if we can avoid fractions, it's going to be a little bit easier. So, but you might say, but I really want to divide by 2. I want to divide by 2. Okay, if you want to divide by 2, you might think, well, with the nectarines, we could bump that up a little bit. We could add 1 nectarine. And if we added a nectarine, then we would be up to 16 nectarines. And then are we happy to divide by 2 at that point?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. We can divide by 2 because we can divide both of those by 2 and have whole numbers. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they're the rules. They're the rules of this game. And what we're going to do, we're going to do a series of operations with just those rules. And at the end of the operations, and we might try 6 or 7 different operations, the goal is to have 0 avocados. All right. So we want to have the avocados all wiped out. Okay. And you think, well, that's not such a big deal. It will end up being a pretty good magic trick if we can do all that. Okay. So I'm just going to clear, and my apologies, I'm just going to have to undo everything here because I haven't used this little program yet. I was just only practicing it this morning, this particular one. Okay. All right, so let's see. First step. Do you remember what the first step was? The first rule was we're just always going to start off with 1 avocado. So I'm just going to write the start. And we're starting off with 1 avocado. And Kylie, I might get a little bit of interaction. Is the chat on at all?
The chat is definitely on. It's
great. Great. So, okay.
Who's game?
So if someone wants to tell me, I can't see this. Are you following the chat?
Yes.
Kylie? Okay. Yeah. All right. So maybe someone can tell me, maybe add some nectarines or follow those rules. So I'll throw to you, Kylie. You tell me what someone's writing, and I'll just follow what people are telling me, and we can see how. Okay,
so you want them to choose a number of nectarines to add.
Yeah. But it's probably we don't want to go 20 or 30 or something. We'll just keep it sort of smallish. But okay. But it'll work anyway.
Anyone want to throw a number at Pat for number of nectarines to add? Everyone's being shy.
Oh, don't be shy.
Here we go. Thanks, Paula. 5. Oh, and Alicia, they both said 5. So there you go.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So we're adding 5 nectarines. Okay. So at this point, we've still got the 1 avocado, plus we now have 5 nectarines. Terrific. Okay. Anyone else now wanting to? We can sort of. I wouldn't be dividing just yet. I maybe multiply by something at this point. But if anyone, let's just throw it in the chat if we want to add some stuff or multiply by some stuff. Any multiplications? Okay, maybe I'll multiply by something.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so let's say we're going to multiply by 3. Okay. So remember the rule. Yep. I'll get 3 avocados at this point. And remember, we need to multiply the 5 nectarines. So we're up to 15 nectarines. Okay. Okay. Now, the other one we did say something about avocados. Can we Anyone want to add or subtract any avocados? Let's see how people remember that rule. We can only add or subtract one avocado at a time. So let's say we subtracted an avocado.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to subtract one avocado. So now we are down to 2 avocados, and we've still got the 15 nectarines.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then we could say, well, we'll sort of mix it up a little bit. We've done some multiplication. We might say, I wouldn't mind doing some division at this point, but I can't think of anything to divide by yet unless we're going to get some fractions. So we might say, well, if we were to say, if we could add a few more nectarines, possibly, if I add 3 nectarines as an example, I'll know I'll bump that one up to an even number. I've still got 2 avocados, and now I've got 18 nectarines, and that lends itself to a division of
2.
If we can divide by 2 now. Oops,
Yeah.
sorry, I've just... If we're dividing by 2, we're down to 1 avocado, and remembering the rule is you've got to divide everything by the 2, so we're down to 9 nectarines there. And if you can recall, we've done a few steps now. We'll just see how many steps we've done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. I said, let's see if we can knock it off in 7 steps. So I think we're going to get it. So to finish off in 7 steps, we've got to get rid of, the rule is you've got to get rid of those avocados. So my last thing I'm going to do is to take away the avocado. And in doing so, the avocado is gone, and we're left with 9 nectarines to finish. Okay. So I think that is something, well, I've shown that to lots and lots of people over the years, and they've all understood that quite easily. Okay, that's not a necessarily challenging thing to do, which is why I've introduced it as the first thing to do in terms of algebra. Excuse me, because I've talked about avocados and nectarines, but now we're actually going to bring in a magic trick where instead of an avocado, we're going to start that with a number between 1 and 10. And instead of talking about nectarines, I'm just going to talk about our regular numbers. So when I say add 5 nectarines, I'm just going to say add 5. And when I say add 3 nectarines, we're going to add 3. So that's how we're going to do it. So it would be good if people have a pen and paper now, because this is what you actually want to practice, right? You actually want to practice and do this live, unless you're listening to this while you're driving, then I probably wouldn't pick up a pen. But if you're not, if you're listening to it and you've got a pen and paper, what I would like you to do is just choose a number between 1 and 10 and write that down. And I'm just going to go through the steps that we just created together as a team there and see how we go with this magic trick. Okay, so you've got your number you started with between 1 and 10. The next thing I want you to do is add 5. If you're using a calculator, you've got to press equals at the end of each one. But okay, so you've added 5. The next thing I want you to do is multiply by 3. And again, if you're using a calculator, you've got to press equals. The next thing I want you to do is to take away the number you started with.
This is showing my math skills here, Pat.
Are you keeping up, Kylie? All right. Then I want you to add 3. Then the next step, I want you to divide by 2. And the final step, take away the number you started with again. Now, if everyone in the chat could write what number they've now got in front of them.
Oh.
What do we got? What do we got? 9, 9, 9's eyes.
9, 9.
Okay, nearly all 9s. 9 was right. Okay, if you got 9, it's good. Okay, if you didn't get 9, just something went slightly awry. Okay, so Now, I'll tell you why you should be getting 9. Okay, and this is when you can start now bringing into the algebra side of things. Okay, so I'm just going to rub something out here. Where's the...
It's a good little program you found.
Well, yeah, it's called Fig Jam. Yeah, so yes, we've used some parts of this program somewhere else, but this was okay. So here we go. I'm going to bring algebra into it now. So the algebra side of it is this. The very first step when I said to start, I said pick a number between 1 and 10. I could have chosen to pick any number, but 1 and 10 is a nice, easy one to work with. However, I don't know what anyone's picked. So I'm going to call that, and I'll bring algebra into it now. I'm going to call that A. And A just stands for any sort of number at this point. And then the next thing we said, let's add 5 nectarines, right? Now, when I talk about nectarines, they're just normal numbers. So when I say add 5, all right, and I'm just going to just to make this a bit easier, where I've got A, it's at the moment it's 1A, all right, 1A. Now, we then said 1A, and then we're adding 5. So we've still got this 1A, but now we've got this plus 5. All right, so that's algebra. It's an algebraic term, a numeric term. Okay, the next thing we did was multiply by 3. And remember, with our rule about multiplication, we've got to do it everywhere. We just can't do it to one thing. So that's why we've got 1A, and we multiply by 3, we get 3A. And when we multiply 5 by 3, well, that's a bit easier, get 15. Now, the next thing I said, we talked about taking away an avocado. What that was in the number trick game was I said, take away the number you started with, because I don't know what anyone started with, except we know everyone is starting with A, right? The unknown. So if you've got 3A and we're taking away 1A, we are down to 2A. And the 15 it's separate. It's got nothing to do with the A's. And I think that's one of the big things with algebra. When you add and subtract, all right, when you add and subtract, it basically only affects one of the terms. All right. Next thing, I said to add 3 nectarines. So again, now 3 nectarines, or the number 3, add 3, it's got nothing to do with the algebraic term. So that's why that stays as 2A. But when we add the 3, we get 18. And then the next thing we talked about was dividing by 2, and remembering that when we talked about division, everything had to be divided. So we had 2A, we divide that by 2, we get down to 1A, and 18 divided by 2 is 9. And the final step in this magic trick was we were taking away an avocado, we were taking away the number you started with. Yep. And that number we started with was A, back up here. All right, so if we take the 1A away, it's gone, all right? So it's no longer there. And that's why that's out. 9 is still there, and 9 is there for everybody if it's done right. So that magic trick, I guess, is heavily reliant on algebra, because if you can just follow those algebraic steps, that the kids really enjoy being able to do that. Now, look, we did that in 15 minutes or so. That was a bit of a fast forward way of doing that. But if I was to sit down, and depending on what age the child is, you'd probably spend a little bit more time with the whole avocados and nectarines firstly, and practice that a bit. And once you've practiced that a bit, then you can move into things involving that algebra. So we fast tracked that in 15 minutes, which I think is a pretty good effort. So there will be certain levels of understanding just even then. But but it's a great way of introducing algebra, and then with that, the kids can actually start making their own algebraic tricks and practicing them on, family and friends and that. And then it is a bit of magic, when people, you can say, go through all the steps, and then I think, and you've got the number 9, or you got the number 5, or whatever it is. It's a really good little exercise that helps develop in a fun way a bit of confidence in algebra, at least initially with the algebra stuff. So I think that's a nice intro to algebra. I'm just wondering, it would be nice to get from the chat, did sort of people understand that, or did I go a bit too quick, or?
I haven't got anything in the chat. Anyone want to add something about how you found that? So I guess from a teaching perspective with your child, as long as they can do all their basic facts, addition, multiplication, division, then you can introduce this introductory concept to them.
Well, that's right. And it's an interesting one because, you can introduce them quite young to this, all right? And as long as they, know some, well, the division and the multiplication, of course, the multiplication is generally a little bit easier. The divisions are a little bit tricky. The only thing, I guess, if I was to look at that and tell you where things are can be a little bit tricky, is when you talk about dividing by something, that they have to sometimes balance it out to make sure the division doesn't involve fractions. I mean, algebraically, it'll still work with fractions, but you do want to avoid it, I would say.
All right.
I think,
Claire has seen it as an algebraic expression, help see how the number always ended in 9. That was great.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So that was the thing. And I didn't want to, and the last thing you want to do is introduce algebra first, right? And that's where you sort of use some physical things. And I chose avocados and nectarines because nectarines is the N for numbers, and avocados for the algebraic term. But anyway, you could choose anything. But I do think it's a good one, and it's amazing how quickly the kids can actually pick that one up. And like I said, once the beauty of it is that they can actually develop their own tricks, and they can do as many. I mean, we knocked it over in 7 steps, and I wanted to do that just so we wouldn't be there forever. But I mean, you could do it. You take your 20 steps and so on, and the trick would be, when I say trick, not so much the trick, but one of the big instructions is to make sure that, particularly if they're very long, it's a long, 10, 12 steps or something, that possibly the person who you're testing it on, whether it be, your mum or dad or older brother or sister or whoever, if they're going to use a calculator, just make sure that after each step that they have to press the equals button. And the reason that happens is that if you were, for example, I'll just clear the screen a bit. If you were, for example, if you started with 5, and then I told you to add 3, then multiply by 2, okay? Well, if you just do it from left to right and you're working out your answer straight away, you'll get 16. However, if you just put that on the calculator will look at that and see it's got a plus and a multiplication. It's got to do the multiplication first. That's 6. 5 plus 6 is 11, right? So that's just something to be aware of, that if someone is doing it on the calculator, just to make sure that after each step that they press equals. So 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. So just that's one thing, because that's basically when most people, if they get it mixed up, that's when they get it mixed up, and they'll say, "Oh, this didn't work. It'll work." But
and so, just to clarify, if you're doing it with kids, no matter how many steps, you're always going to come out with 9 at the end.
Oh well, we've got 9. It'll come out with the number that is the point where you have got rid of the algebraic term. All right. So if I, for example, if we were doing it and we were down to if we got, say, 3a plus 12 at one point, let's say that was, a few steps in. We've got 3a plus 12. And we could say, oh, well, this lends itself nicely to, divide by 3.
Mm-hmm.
And if we divide by 3, then we are going to get, 1a, or in any practice, they'll eventually just write a, but I would say 1a at this point. So we'll get 1a plus 4. And then if the last step, if they subtract the 1a then,
yep.
and that goes,
left with 4.
Then it'll be 4.
Yep.
So that's what Yep.
Yep. Just want to make sure everyone's following that, because you never know.
No, that's good. No, it was a good question. That's a good question. Yeah. Why aren't I getting 9? Okay. No, that's a good question. So and that's the beauty of it, and you can sort of. I mean, I've done this in groups of adults, and it's been quite interesting where I've said to them, okay, by the end of this, even if you're no good at algebra, or you're hopeless at school, or you'll end up high-fiving everybody, right? And so basically what I then do is I work my way through it, and then I end up with the number 5 deliberately. And then I tell them, okay, now whatever number you've got, put it on, if it fits on one hand, do it on one hand. If it fits on 2, do it on 2. And then put it up in the air. So they'll put their phone and look around. And if you've got the same number, start high-fiving. So anyway, that's good fun. So everyone, yeah. I mean, it's a bit awkward for the people who have put 2 hands up, got 7 or something. But anyway, 90, I think it's probably 80%. 80% will get it, 80%. But anyway, it's good fun.
Good. Anyone going to try it with their kids with this one? I'm not sure, but maybe we should have asked actually where you're all at with your children in terms of where they're at with their maths and, older kids. But I guess, how would you, if you've got a child who's struggling in this area, maybe you can expand a little bit on that for us.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, okay. Well, I sort of chose this one because this is a great introduction, as well as, even if they're a little bit older, it's a good one as well. But if they're struggling with some algebraic terms, I mean, and the beauty of what I've just shown here is that they can treat the algebraic term, different from the numeric term, particularly when they're adding and subtracting, okay? Because when they add and subtract, one of the big things here, I'll just stop sharing, I think. I'll just talk for a little while. One of the big things I noticed, over many decades now, is that the adding and subtracting, if they have 5a and they got to add 7, they might add the 7 to the 5a and get confused and so on. But if they can really understand that when they're adding and subtracting, the algebraic term has got to be the exact same term that you're adding. Otherwise, you can't add, you can't add, a 5a with a 2b, for example. The algebraic term is different. And that's why I think it's a great thing to actually separate, is this an algebraic term, or is it just like a normal number? Yeah. And if it's a normal number, you can just add your normal numbers with that. And if it's algebraic term, add the algebraic terms with that. But really one of the big things is, when you do multiply, okay? When you multiply, most common mistake, they'll multiply one of the terms, but not the other term. And that's why in this little magic trick, I did make a bit of a point about there's only a few rules you got to remember. When you multiply, you got to multiply everything that's there. Okay, that's the biggest mistake they make, on the basic level. And it's the same with division. Again, if you're going to divide, you got to divide everything that's there. So that's the biggest mistakes they make on a simpler version. I mean, the other thing I always like, and this relates to times tables. So people know. Do you need to know times tables? Well, you have to. You got to know your times tables, and you got to know them fast. And one of the critical things is, because people, some people wrongly say, well, they can have a calculator later on. You don't really need to know. That one of the reasons that's so wrong is that when we come to algebraic, what's called factorization, one of the key skills there is an operation or a procedure where you've got to find 2 numbers that multiply to give you something, and those 2 numbers add to give you something. So, for example, if I said, give me two numbers that multiply to give me 10 and add to give me 7. And most people think, oh, that's 5 and 2. That's not too hard. Okay, and that one isn't too hard. I deliberately chose that one, right? But later on, when I say, okay, give me two numbers that multiply to give me 24 and add to give me 11, okay, then you've got a lot of numbers that you're sort of thinking, because there's a lot of pairs that multiply to give 24. In this case, we're thinking 3 times 8. 3 8s, 24, 3 plus 8 is 11. But that skill is so important when it comes to factorization, which everybody will eventually do, right? Generally around grade, year 9, generally. Whereas that one is sort of overlooked, right? Because of people's, misconception on how important times tables are. I'll give you an example, and this was where there's a little bit of a disconnect I see in high school maths compared to, primary school maths. And it's disconnect in, it's everywhere, right? Not just Australia, not in just in Australia schools, is everywhere. It's because there's no, when the primary teachers don't really know what happens in high school maths, right? They know what they got to teach. And if I say to my primary teachers, I say, look, I've got a couple of widgets that you can use with your classes. One of them will be what I just explained there, One of them will be a little thing where they can practice multiplying two numbers or finding two numbers that multiply to give this and they add to give that, right? So I can give you that.
Yep.
And I can give you this other widget, which will make the long division, right? Long division a lot easier for all your kids, right? Now, all the primary teachers, they said, oh, the long division, give me that. Give me the long division one, because that's the bane of my life. Okay. Whereas if I give the same thing, where if I say that to the high school teachers, they'll say, well, long division, okay. Long division, they do it in year 6. The next time anyone does long division are only the top 12% of kids might do it in year 11 when they do what's called polynomial division, right? Other than that, long division is never seen again, right? But the skill of multiplying two numbers and add to get the two numbers, that's a great skill. That's what we want all our kids to know, right? So that's what I mean, there's a disconnect, right? Primary teachers don't have a clue, and it's not their fault, but they don't have a clue that's a really important thing. Whereas long division, because they struggle with it, it's a difficult concept. And while we're talking about long division, I'll say, everyone here that's struggling with long division, I'll tell them, don't panic, right? If your kid gets it, fantastic. If they don't worry. It's seriously not important, because only the top kids see it again when they do year 11 extension stuff, and it's a polynomial division. And like I said, only about 12% of kids will ever see it again, right? And those 12% of kids who see it again, they already figured it out earlier on anyway. So it's an interesting one.
Okay. So does Maths Online use those little widgets, as you call them, and games in the program?
We're actually developing a whole lot now. Yeah, Kylie. So we for a long time we hadn't so much, because we didn't want to be seen as a gamey type of program, yep. Which we're not. We're pretty serious in our instruction, and that's I guess a big differentiator from us as opposed to ordinary sort of math online math program, is that our sort of videos are nice and concise, very clear, very understandable. Sort of 3, 4, 5 minute bites, and it gives the kids enough time to, I didn't quite get it first time around, just go back, watch it again. All right. But and the gamey side of things, we didn't see, well, until now, we didn't see how well we could combine that with what we've got. But right now, we are developing a whole lot of that sort of stuff, and it's just become a lot easier to create that. So we're doing that now and implementing the program. So that's exciting for us, and
great.
And the people using it. But but we're being very specific about what we think is a useful tool as opposed to just a fun
game.
Yeah. I'm big for fun. I'm not against fun. Don't worry about that. But
So the next question is actually learning algebra. So I'm sure you've heard this a million times. We don't need algebra. Couldn't tell you the last time I used algebra as an adult. Why do I even need to bother with algebra with my kids?
Yeah, okay.
Tell me on it.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I remember when I was a teacher, and when I was asked that, I said, well, I can tell you you're going to be using algebra, in 3 weeks' time for this test. Okay, but all right, that's not a great answer. But
Yep.
the thing I think with it, not just algebra, but any sort of maths, I always think, well, look, every part of it is logic building, right? You're building logic, you're building patterns, and pattern recognition is it's very underrated when people, when we talk about maths, and sometimes it's not even made a big thing of. But if you can start identifying patterns, and a lot of algebra is pattern recognition as well, that, the idea of identifying patterns, well, actually spills over just in real life. I mean, the pattern of someone's behavior. If you identify someone's pattern of behavior, you can know how better to deal with that person, right? So even from a personal thing is quite interesting. But in terms of all math, the whole idea of building logic, building systems, being able to follow steps and be able to, in a way, with practice, systemize steps that you sort of sometimes get to a stage where you don't necessarily really thinking hard about it. A bit like driving a car. I mean, when you started driving a car, when you jump in the car for the first time, you are concentrating on every single thing, okay. But now you might have driven to the shops and back, and you get home and I don't even remember driving. It's just automatic. So I think in many ways, a lot of the math side of things becomes ingrained with practice, and you've just got these, I guess, innate abilities then that you might not even know, besides your financial side of things. I think that's the biggest application that everyone's going to be using. But, things like trigonometry and Pythagoras, and you think, where am I going to use that? Well, it's all part of the way of building out this brain that thinks logically, can think systematically, can recognize patterns. Bit of a long-winded answer to your question there, Kylie, but I hope that sort of made sense.
No, that's good. No, that was great. I thank you for coming on and showing us that. So I hope some of you will go forth and test that with your kids. And, I know when people watch the replay as well, they'll also do that. Yeah. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on today at all, Pat?
Well, not really. I just want to say that I admire the homeschooling community. And I know I was just talking to Kylie earlier on. I mean, we've got 10 children, and we homeschooled for a short period of time. We were homeschooling 7 at that time. So, and that was pretty tough. So I take my hat off to everyone who homeschools. I mean, it's challenging, and you've all got different reasons why you do that. But I think it's such a wonderful thing that you're doing. Being the teachers of your children, it's very, very important. So, and I was talking to some other people not so long ago, and we were discussing how challenging. Some days you just feel like you want to throw it in, and you just but I just encourage everyone, no matter how hard it is, just realize it is tough, and today might be a real hard day, but get through it. Hopefully, recharge yourself. And the other thing I was telling someone, in terms of taking time out for themselves, and I know my wife and I, when we were in amongst it, I remember we started just having a sort of a morning coffee where we had some older kids who could sort of look after the younger ones at that time, but we could just duck down to the cafe, which was 5-minute walk, and I just remember that was superb. Just something that's so simple. Anyway.
Yeah,
but
it is true. It is just taking those moments when you can. And some of the mums have said thank you for that. So, and it's funny that you say that, because, I've been homeschooling for 18 years now, and it's only really recently that we're no longer weird anymore. But to keep coming through my social media feed is all these random podcast interviews, nothing to do with homeschooling, but just talking about how alternative schooling leading the way, and our current education system is just, not really working for the future. So I think we can, on those hard days, that's what we have to take stock in, that we are the pioneers and leading the way in that. So
that's tremendous.
Yeah, excellent. All right, thank you. Thanks, Alicia. Thanks for today. We used Maths Online for our daughter in high school, and it was amazing. Excellent. There you go.
Good on you. Hey, Claire and Tara. Alicia. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone. Pat's going to be joining us next month sometime. For those of you who would like to delve more into the program, just to find out exactly what Maths Online is, we'll do some screen sharing to get into the nitty-gritty of the program as well. So thank you again, Pat. I really appreciate it. That
You're
was good.
very welcome. I enjoyed it. I'm just actually writing a comment. So
Excellent. All right. Well, if there's no more comments, we will sign off. But thank you all again. No, very quiet. People are starting to leave us now. So we'll say goodbye. Thanks again, Pat.
Okay, great. That was great. I enjoyed that, Kylie. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye then.